Hello everybody, welcome to episode 3 of the midweek molt. This is my weekly podcast that I started a couple of weeks ago and I'm really enjoying doing it. It's nice to see that I've got a very small fan base that are really enjoying this. There's 100 of you or so, and I just want to say thank you to everyone that's tuning in the past couple of weeks and enjoying the topics that we're covering and the questions that we are answering from all of you. And that's going to be the focus of today's podcast. I haven't really got a specific subject that I want to cover, but in the last podcast I did get a couple of interesting questions, 3 interesting questions actually, that I want to cover in today's podcast. So the first question that we got was from the awesome Tammy Pelosi. And now we've spoken a couple of times via Messenger about tarantula questions and stuff that she wanted to know, some information in the hobby, but she decided this week to post me the question, which says, Robbie, I have a question regarding your answer about feeding fossorial species and using mealworms to drop into their burrow. Wouldn't you be concerned that if the tarantula did not eat the mealworm, or if the tarantula was in the middle of molting, that the mealworm either taking advantage of a molting tarantula or changing into a beetle could also impose a threat to the tarantula if it was not eaten as well? I would really like to get your thoughts on this, as there is so much conflicting information out there that it's truly difficult to know which to follow as good and accurate advice. Love your content as always. Well, thank you, Tammy. I'm glad you enjoy it. I'm glad you enjoy the videos and the podcasts that I put out every week. Really appreciate it. Now, to get into the answer of that question, with first off, I'm going to say no, that's not really a concern that I have with fossorials, and here's why. From my experience, the problem with feeders feasting on a freshly molting or mid-molt tarantulas has been predominantly terrestrial tarantulas. Now, when it comes to molting, I've found that terrestrials are opportunistic. If they can molt in a burrow, they will, but they're just as happy to lay a molting mat out there in the open. They're exposed to the elements, they're exposed to predators that could quite easily come along while they're mid-molt and start having a little feast on them. The thing I've found with fossorial tarantulas, and why it's not really too much of a concern, is because when they make their burrows, they do make them very, very, very deep into the ground. I touched on it in the last podcast, that some of these burrows, they go down for like 3 meters. They often have lots of different chambers and loads of places that the tarantula can hold up and safely molt. But not only do they do that, but inside the burrows, they layer it with such thick webbing that if anything managed to dig through into it, managed to get through that thick webbing and get to the molting tarantula, then after all that effort, after not getting stuck on the webbing, the tarantula deserves to be eaten. The only thing that's going to do that is something like, a snake or something digging it up, like a fox or a wolf. I know they don't live in the same areas, but you know what I mean. Anything that can dig it up, or anything strong enough to get through that webbing. I don't know if you've touched it in the past. That stuff is super, super, super strong. So anything trying to dig insect-wise into that burrow is going to have a very, very, very hard time of getting to that tarantula. And even if it does get through that webbing, it's going to get stuck. Now, tarantulas, they shut off the entrance to the hide, and I've found that a lot of fossorials, they will close it several times down the shaft of the burrow. So even if something got through the first little barricade, it's got to come up against barricades time and time and time again. So that's why for me, it's not really a concern when it comes to fossorials, because they do really protect themselves. They know that if they're gonna molt inside a burrow, they need to be well protected, because there's gonna be things knocking on the door trying to get in there and eat. They've evolved to act that way and protect themselves and use the necessary precautions. Unlike fossorials that are just wandering along, they just lay their mat down and they're happy to do it out in the open. They're not really, you know, evolution wise equipped to think, you know, something could come along and eat me here. That's why they're opportunistic, and they will use a burrow if possible for that added safety, but that's the only time I'm ever really concerned of feeders feeding on tarantulas. Even like arboreal tarantulas, they're up in the trees, they make their little cocoon or their little hammock, they cover themselves in web. Nothing is going to get through that web. It's going to be very, very unlikely. Can it happen? Could it happen? Yes, it could. There's every chance in the world that everything I'm saying may go out the window. Something could go in there and it could feast on the molting tarantula, but it's very, 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 very unlikely in my opinion. Now, you can take that with a pinch of salt. You can say I'm wrong, you can argue with it, and that's absolutely fine. I don't mind. You can have a different view, I don't mind. I'm just telling you from my experience, it's not really a concern where fossorial tarantulas are involved. They've just evolved over hundreds of years to deal with that sort of thing, and just because they're in captivity doesn't make it any different. So hopefully that answers your question, and I can move on to the next one. I mean, if you got any follow-up questions, if you've got anything you want me to go into detail with, then I am more than happy if you send me a reply on this podcast. You know, we can talk about it, that's fine. So the next question I got was from Mark the Spider Guy. Awesome guy. He's got a YouTube channel of the same name, Mark the Spider Guy. Check it out. Definitely check it out if you do need new stuff to watch. He's an awesome guy, really friendly. I've met him a few times at invert shows and stuff. So just awesome. So check him out. The question he sent to me was, Robbiestalkingts, I've got a question. In your opinion, at what age would you recommend a new beginner to come into the hobby for a child? Now, I think he means what's the lowest age that someone should be before getting into the hobby. So here's the thing. If you're talking about tarantulas, I'm gonna say that children coming into the hobby, there's nothing wrong with buying them a tarantula, as long as you have the understanding of that it's going to be you doing all the care, all the husbandry, taking care of it and all that stuff. As long as the tarantula remains for the child an observational pet that they can look at and enjoy looking at it and walking away and having no interaction with the spider whatsoever, then any age. But on the side of that, like if you're talking about the invert hobby in general, there's always more appropriate inverts that you can buy from, like millipedes, stick insects, isopods, etc., that they can get more involved with. As far as someone coming into the hobby for the first time, it all depends on the individual. It depends on their maturity, it depends on how much they want to do it, how much they research what they're getting into. That's what it depends on, because some people mature younger. Like there's 11 and 12-year-olds out there that could quite easily pick up a tarantula, have no issues with it, they're absolutely sensible. They feed it, they put the water in, they don't pick it up, they don't act like idiots and pull it on their faces or pull it on their heads or film themselves doing it for others to watch and think they're big and clever and funny and try and scare people with them. They treat it with respect. Now, if they're going to do that and they're responsible enough, there's no reason why. But you've also got kids out there who maybe their parents refuse to admit it or not. They're not responsible enough. So that age will change. But as far as I'm concerned, if they've got the maturity to do it and it's something that they've really, really set their heart on and they are fully focused on it and they understand that they're not dogs or cats or guinea pigs or hamsters that you can really get involved in, then whenever they're ready, just give them a little bit of parental supervision to start with, just to make sure that they are comfortable and they do know what they're doing and they do everything with safety in mind and they're not messing about with it. And I've got no issues with that whatsoever. So hopefully that answers your question mark on the age that someone should be getting a tarantula. Hopefully. I mean, you may have a conflicting opinion on it, but that's my opinion on it. It all depends on the individual. So the third question that we got, moving on, was from Jeffrey Medeiros. I hope I said your name properly, mate. If I didn't, I apologise. And he wrote in and said, Robbie, what is your favourite underrated tarantula species? For me, it's the S. hoffmani. Love how they are the only New World with a horn on its carapace. I'm currently trying to get one, but it's very, very difficult. Now, this is a very, very simple answer for me. My favourite underrated tarantula species, without a shadow of a doubt, is Tliticatawelba colossus. They are one of the most underrated species in the entire hobby. The majority of people think they're ugly, they're boring, there's nothing to them, they're pet rocks. I just find them fascinating. I find them absolutely stunning. And for me, that is my pick of the most underrated tarantula species. I mean, there's many that I could pick out, but no, for me, that's it. Very basic, very simple, great beginner species for anyone getting into the hobby. Good temperament, which, you know, take that with a pinch of salt, because some people do get specimens that are very temperamental, but on the whole, they're very well behaved, they're easy to care for, and in their own right, they're absolutely stunning. The thing is with these is people don't actually really sit and look at them. No other tarantula in the hobby looks like an Albopilossus. Those striking white hairs, how fuzzy they are, the coloration, the markings on them, the goldy bronze tones on the carapace, they are amazing to look at. But everyone overlooks them as just a boring brown tarantula. I think a lot of people in the hobby, they get brought up thinking that, you know, if you get a tarantula, you've got to have something with a lot of colour like Pisciferium metallica, or they want something big and feisty like Ferrophosa sturmi, or yeah, you know, they come in with that idea that, you know, if they're not getting the big, bright, beautifully coloured tarantulas, then there's not really no point in getting them. But no, for me, Sliticatl albocolossus is a very underrated species, which actually, now you've asked me that question, I may actually have to make a video on my top 5 or top 10 underrated species in the hobby, just to get people's feedback on it, and if they agree, they disagree, or if they have something different in mind. Or I think that would be a very interesting video to put out. So if you want to see that, write in the comments if you'd like to see it, and yeah, I'll happily make the video. And yeah, that's the answers to my question. So having answered those questions, those are all from my notes here. All the questions that I seem to have got. There's lots of comments here about my last podcast, about how people agree with me, about when people first got into the hobby, about the harsh treatment they got for asking questions, being new to the hobby, and getting a hostile response. So I'm glad that a lot of people I wasn't just crazy and talking silliness, and that a lot of people experience that. It's great to get that feedback and know that you know, in this hobby it is a problem, this elitist sort of view of you should go away, and before you even open your mouth in the hobby you should know everything you need to know, otherwise you know you don't deserve being here. So and some of the people in there have been, like, who have said this, have been in the hobby for years. So it's I do think it's a problem that needs to be addressed personally, and I do think more people need to speak out about it and share their experiences, because it's just like everything in the hobby. If you don't share your knowledge of it, and you don't share what you've learned from it, the viewpoint is never going to change. And if the viewpoint stays the same, then the next generation and the next generation after that and after that, yeah, we're all going to experience the same harsh problems. And I don't think the hobby is here for that. I don't think anyone getting into this hobby should be subjected to those kind of responses and comments and the harassment and just, you know, not wanting to be in the hobby in general. I mean, I've seen that over the past couple of weeks. There's a lot of people at the minute who are selling their whole collections and don't want to be in the hobby anymore because A, they've gotten bored of it, or B, the community has made them feel like they shouldn't be part of it, and they're just not comfortable in it and would rather be somewhere else. I think that's not something that we should be aiming for, and, you know, promoting this elitist sort of idea. People need to be welcomed into this hobby, not only, like, even for the tarantulas themselves, like the amount that they're being bred these days. We need more keepers. We need these species to thrive, and the only way we do that is to get beginners in the hobby to learn the information that they need in order to keep them, just so that the tarantulas can thrive. We need to be helping these people. We don't need to be shooting them down for not knowing the answers to questions. So it's really nice that I could put that out there. And it's just nice in general that we've got a forum that we can all speak and share ideas, and I'm really happy with that. Hopefully as time goes on we can get more and more people chipping in and, you know, asking questions, giving information, sharing ideas, and just building a really, really nice community. If I can do that off the back of this podcast, that would be absolutely amazing, because that's what I've been aiming for with my channel all along, is not only give really good husbandry advice and help to people that need it, but have a platform where people can help each other. That is the most important thing for me, and are my two main goals for the channel. No more, no less. I'm not in it for the fame or the notoriety or earning money or to be the most popular person in the world or get some sort of status in the community. That's never really been my intention. Mine's just been to help people that need it, and give genuine help and advice when asked for. I'm not gonna go out there and start making entertainment videos that are bad for the hobby and have bad repercussions, and just make myself look like a really bad keeper. Like, I'm not going to do that just for views and money and all that stuff. Nah, that's not happening here. I'll leave that for the other idiots that want to go and make a bad name for themselves. I'm hoping by giving the right advice and helpful advice that when people do come across those channels and those forums, they have the knowledge to go, yeah, that's not right. I'm not going to give that the time of day. I'm not even going to, support that. And they have the right frame of mind just to walk away. And the only thing you can do is ignore it. If you ignore it long enough, people stop trying, and it will sort itself out. Now, it is going to happen time and time again while these things are glamorized and people are like, yeah, do more of that. But things won't change until we all stand up and set a good example. And yeah, that's all I've got to say on it. Just keep fighting the good fight, people, and yeah, just be sensible. But anyway, I've waffled on now for long enough about my thoughts on that. I'm gonna bring this tiny little podcast to an end here, and like I say in every podcast, if you've got any questions or any topics you want covered, feel free to write them in the comments. I really appreciate you coming back again. This is episode 3. I'm looking forward to episode 4 next week, when I get to answer more of your questions and cover more of your topics. Nothing is off limits when it comes to tarantulas. If it's a controversial subject with tarantulas, I'm happy to discuss it. I may say something controversial myself. You never know, it could happen. I've done it in the past. I'm more than likely going to do it in the future. The problem with doing things on a media platform is you're always going to say something that someone doesn't like, and you're always going to say something that someone doesn't agree with. But unless it's said, and unless it's thought about, and unless it's discussed, it's just going to keep happening time and time again. And that's what we don't want in the hobby. We just want it to get better. And that's my message for this week. So thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate you coming back. I'll see you in the next podcast. Take care.